Okay, Richard, you need to switch off your mic, please. Thank you. Good morning, students. Let me just okay, we're going to start now. I'm just checking something quickly. Okay, students, I want us just to take a few steps back this morning, and then I want us to go, before I continue any other work, I forgot to touch on learning unit 7. So I want us to touch on, let's start with learning unit 7 this morning, the issue of domicile, page 52. So I want you to go to page 52 so long. Okay, so any questions for me before we start? Any questions for me before we start? I have one or two announcements, but any questions for me? Okay, let me just see. Okay, students, then to some of you via email, I think Terence is one of them, Angela is one of them, Denzel is one of them, then there's, I mentioned Terence already, Angela I mentioned, what is, I think it's a Nicolette. Let me just see. I think it's Nicolette. Let me just see the name here. Okay, I think it's a Nicolette. Also, I responded to your submitted work yesterday via email, and I indicated to you that you will get your feedback on those matters on Monday morning. So Monday morning I'll send it off, and there's some of you I arranged one-on-one sessions with. I think Angela is one of them. There's other few students, I can't get to their names now, but those emails will also go out Monday morning for the one-on-one sessions. And then I indicated to Adele now that some of you have requested one-on-one sessions with me, but you haven't put in email or contact details, so I'm not able to respond to that. Okay, so now that the announcements are done, I'd like to start. So before I start, are there any questions related to last week's work? Any questions related to last week's work? You ask me now. You either unmute your mic and you ask me, or you type it in the chat function. I'll give you a minute. Olusola, you need to switch off your mic, please. Okay, then if there's no questions, we can continue.
Sorry, good morning, Advocate Kleinhans. It's Terence here.
Morning, Terence. How are you?
Good. I'm very well, thank you. And yourself? Are you good?
Very good, very good. What's the question?
Excellent. Just the question is on the liability of the guardian. Okay, in Heaton's, in the book of Heaton, the textbook, on page 91 at the top, it says the guardian is, however, liable on the contract if the minor acted as his or her agent. How is that possible? I mean, how can the minor act as a guardian's agent?
It can be possible, okay, in certain circumstances, especially if the minor was married, if there is emancipation of the minor, but that I will touch on later during the session. Yeah,
Okay.
but it is possible. It is possible. Yeah?
Okay, because
Yes, continue.
No, because I know that if they marry, then they are released. They become a major.
Yes. Yes.
And then they are allowed to enter into contracts.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay, we'll continue that discussion later. Any other questions, Terence?
No, that's fine at the moment.
So
the other one was on the statutory exceptions regarding the minor's capacity to act. It's not a question really. I was just maybe I was ignorant, but the friendly societies, I wasn't aware of the word friendly societies. It probably goes back a long way.
Which friendly societies which are regarded as juristic persons?
Yes, that's right. Primarily are those insurance companies today or pension companies?
It's those friendly societies are normally, in terms of my understanding, I need to confirm it, but in terms of my understanding, it's normally societies that function in terms of the non-profit arena.
Right. Okay.
Okay.
So, right, cooperatives and things like that, or because I read somewhere that it goes back to the days where there weren't insurance companies and people's assets, and they needed to be safeguarded. So they formed these friendly societies for the people to safeguard their assets and or their money. Is that right?
That was in the past, but that has been taken over by by other vehicles such as trust, insurance companies,
Yeah, yeah,
all of that.
that's right.
So
Yeah,
it's in a sense it's become absolute
right.
obsolete
Okay.
as well.
So the
Obsolete.
history of it is like way in the past. So, but today in the modern day, it's obviously other vehicles have, as you say, have taken its place.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Yes. Okay, so okay. Questions from any other students? Questions from any other students? Let me check my device if there's questions from anyone else. Okay. Now, before I start, I'm seeing in the group that it has grown a bit. Are there any new students this morning? I know Angela is. Louise Esterhazen, are you new? Jamie Lee van der Westhuizen, I think I saw your name already. Manny Stalberg, are you new?
Yes,
Just
I'm
type
new.
in. Okay, Manny, welcome. Where are you from?
From White River, Mpumalanga.
Are you in Mpumalanga?
Yes,
And do you know where I am?
correct.
Where am I?
In the Western Cape.
I'm in the Western Cape. Okay,
Mm.
so Mpumalanga, welcome. I've been in Witbank before. I think that's part of your province, eh?
Oh, I just recently came back from the Western Cape. I was the intelligence commander for the AGU.
Oh, so you work for SAPS?
Yes, I'm intelligence.
Yes. I was part of the launch of the AGU with the president. I think it was out in Hanover Park in
That,
2016. Nee? So welcome to the group.
thanks.
Okay.
Morning, everybody.
Um, students, so Manny's new. Um, I don't have confirmation from the other student, Jamie Lee van der Westhuizen. So what I want us to do quickly is just to speak of the issue of domicile, and that's learning unit 7 on page 52. Okay. Now, we're going to see now why domicile is important, and I want us to go to the bottom of page 53 at paragraph 7.1. And there it tells us that that um, one of the factors, okay, this is but a factor, but it's a very important factor. One of the factors which also establishes, and I'm going to give you an example now. Okay, one of the factors which also establishes a person's status is the factor of domicile. Okay, now domicile is the place where you find yourself. Okay, in order to litigate, in order to be held accountable for crimes and delicts, etc. Okay, we're going to go into the definition into a bit more detail now soon. But one of the factors that influences or determines a person's status is that of domicile as well. Okay, domicile is also an important factor that determines jurisdiction. Okay, now we all know what jurisdiction is. If I quickly go over, jurisdiction is the power, okay, any forum or court has to adjudicate a matter. Now, jurisdiction is influenced by your area and domicile as well. Okay, now let's say there are two parents. I'm going to give you an example from family law now. Okay, just to illustrate how domicile and jurisdiction interlink with one another. So let's say you have unmarried parents, okay? Unmarried parents, and they are the parents of a 2-year-old child, okay? The one parent stays out in Bellville in the Western Cape, and the other parent stays out in Port Elizabeth. So the mother and the 2-year-old stays out in Port Elizabeth, and the father of the child stays out in Bellville in the Western Cape. Okay? So let's say there's now a dispute between the parents with regard to care and contact of the child. The father's contact is frustrated because he now alleges that he can't spend time with his 2-year-old child. The father decides to institute an action or bring an application to court to have rights of access. Okay? I want one of you to try to explain to me which court will have jurisdiction over this matter and why. Okay? You can unmute your mics and speak to me, or you can put your response into the chat function. Okay? We have two disputing parents, they're not married. Okay? The mother and the 2-year-old child stays out in Port Elizabeth. The father stays out in the Western Cape. The father now wants to bring an application for access to his minor child. He wants to spend time with the child. Okay? To which court does he bring his application? Okay? Any comments on that for me, quickly? Any comments on that?
Good morning, over to Clarence. It's Terence here. I would say he would bring the action or the application to the court where he is domiciled. So he's domiciled in the Western Cape, right? So he's domiciled there. That's where his duties, legal responsibilities are. And so I would say the court that he would be the Western Cape court. He would make application.
Which court in the Western Cape?
Which court? Right. That would be the the High Court.
You're saying the High Court? Why the High Court?
Why the High Court? Because it's a family matter.
For that answer, because it's a family matter, I'd give you half a mark. You're on the right track, but you can elaborate on the answer more. Think about it. I'm
Okay.
taking note of your answer. I just want to. So you're saying the courts in the Western Cape have jurisdiction over that matter? Why? One reason is domicile.
He's domiciled, yes.
He's domiciled in the Western Cape. Okay. Thanks, Terence. Any other responses? Angeli saying the Belleville court because that's where he's domiciled. That is the same answer as Terence. Louisa saying the Belleville court because the unmarried mother automatically has guardianship. No, Louise, that answer does not make sense at all. So you need to listen to my response now carefully, Louise. I hope you have your notepad and your pen with you. But good attempt. Richard, I think the father would go to the nearest court where he stays. Okay. Thank you, Louise. So many of you are saying that we follow the jurisdiction of the father. Firstly, because the father is now domiciled in a certain area, and then you are also saying, I think for some reason, you are also saying to me, because this is possibly where the dispute originates from. Okay, so listen to my response. Okay, any other questions or any other comments before I give my response?
Hello, it's Manny.
Who am I speaking to now?
Manny.
Okay, Manny, what is your response?
Where the father's new address is, he can also approach the magistrate's court there.
Why the magistrate's court, Manny? That is a good answer. Why the magistrate's court?
The magistrate court deals with issues of maintenance. You go to the family part of the. I think it's the maintenance court. He can goes to there, or he can
But
approach
it forms part of which branch of the court? I want that answer from you. You're on the right track.
It's the family advocate. He can also approach the family.
No, it forms part of the family court.
Family court. Yeah, he goes to the family court because if he didn't have an address where he was going to, then he had to use his former address, because now he's got a new address, a new domicile, so he can use that one where he is.
But you are essentially saying, Manny, that the courts in the Western Cape have jurisdiction, including the magistrates court in the Western Cape, because it deals with family law related matters. Is that what you're saying to me?
That's what I'm saying.
Okay. Anything else you want to say to me?
No, that's fine.
Okay, so switch off your mic, have your notepad ready, and listen to my response. Ne? Listen to my response. Ne? Give me 1 second, students. Give me 1 second. Okay, students. So many of you are giving me the opinion that we follow the jurisdiction of the father, firstly, because he's domiciled in the Western Cape. Students like Terence and Manny is agreeing that the Western Cape High Court has jurisdiction. Manny has added that we can add the Magistrates Court in the Western Cape to that because the Magistrates Court deals with family law related matters. Okay, so here's my response. Okay, so in terms of jurisdiction, okay, when it now comes to this dispute related to the child, okay, and one example, domicile can be affected by legislation as well. Okay, so in a family law related matter, for example, when it comes to a contact and care dispute with regard to the minor child, the law tells us that we follow the jurisdiction of the child. We follow the jurisdiction of the child. So because the child now resides with his or her biological mother in Port Elizabeth, we will now follow the domicile of the mother, meaning the courts in Port Elizabeth will now have jurisdiction over that matter, meaning that the father who stays out in the Western Cape, he now needs to bring his application for access to the minor child either to the Children's Court in Port Elizabeth, Children's Court or Family Court, which has the jurisdiction of a magistrate's court. So he either needs to bring that application to magistrate's court, or he can bring that application to the Eastern Cape Division of the High Court. Okay, students, do you have that? Does that answer make sense to you? So in family law related matters, especially regarding care and contact disputes, we follow the jurisdiction of the child. We follow the jurisdiction of the child. Okay, so there's the example. Okay, so if we go to the introduction part, paragraph 7.1, it tells us there in the third line, since legal systems differ from one another, it is necessary to establish which legal system determines a person's status. So in other words, meaning according to which legal system, it must be determined whether and to what extent a person has legal capacity, capacity to act, capacity to litigate, and capacity to be held accountable for crimes and delicts. The law which determines a person's status is the law in force at the place where the person is domiciled. Okay, that is his or her lex domicili. So the Latin word lex domicili has a reference to the law which is in place where the person finds him or herself, or where the person is domiciled. Okay. Now, let's first jump to paragraph 7.3 on page 54, and then we look at the definition. So the definition is contained, just give me 1 second. The definition of the law of domicile is contained in Heaton's textbook. So let me just find it in my textbook as well.
I think on Heaton it's page 41.
Yes, I'm just going to Heaton quickly. Give me a second. Okay. Um, okay. So basically, the definition of domicile relates to where you find yourself for the purposes of juristic acts. Okay. Now, in terms of the definition of domicile, okay, it tells us domicile is the place where a person is deemed to be constantly present, okay, constantly present for the purposes of exercising his or her rights and fulfilling his or her obligations, even in the event of his or her factual absence. And that is at page 41 of Heaton. Okay, I'm going to go through it again because then we're going to touch on the various principles. Okay, so in a nutshell, okay, the law of domicile, okay, tells us that it relates to the place where the person is deemed to be constantly present for the purposes of exercising his or her rights and fulfilling his or her obligations in the event, even in the event of his or her factual absence. Okay, now let's look at the basic principles governing the issue of domicile. Okay, and in our law, there are 3 principles. Okay, and we are going to be looking at these 3 principles now. And the first one, I'm on the top of page 55 in the course reader, and these principles that govern domicile is also listed at page 41 of Heaton. And the first principle tells us that every person must have a domicile at all times. Okay, so you see the word must is used. Every person must have a domicile at all times. So no one at any time, no one at any time can be without a domicile. Give me a second, let me just sneeze my nose. Okay, so the reason for this principle is that a person's status is largely dependent on his or her domicile in law. This means the law therefore cannot allow a person to be without a domicile at any given time. Okay, so the first principle of the law of domicile is you must have a domicile at all times. Okay. Number 2, the changing of a person's domicile is never accepted without proof. Okay. The changing of a person's domicile is never accepted without proof. Meaning, if it is proved that a person has established a domicile at a specific place, okay, the law accepts that he or she retains that domicile until the contrary is proved. Okay, so the onus now rests on the person changing his or her domicile to prove that his domicile is changed. Okay, and principle number 3, okay, also very, very important because it ties in with principle number 1, and it tells us no one can have a domicile in more than one place at the same time. Okay, no person can have a domicile in more than one place at the same time. Okay, any questions for me so far? Students, any questions for me so far? Any questions for me so far? Angela, I'm going to note your question later in our discussion. That's a very good question. Okay, Angela is saying, how would you classify homeless people? What does the law say about the domicile? Angela, very good question. We will go to that in a little while. Let me see if there's any other questions. Okay, let's continue. And now, before we go, yes, sir.
Yes, I raised my arm, but you didn't notice that.
Who
I
am
wanted
talking to?
You're speaking to Abinwi.
Okay, Binwe, is it the first? No, it's not the first time in this class, eh?
Yes, yes, advocate.
Okay,
Yes,
what is your
advocate.
question?
My question is on the third principle that say no one has or have a domicile more than one place at the same time. What in a situation where maybe you reside in the Western Cape for a number of months equal to the number of months that you reside, say, in Gauteng for business or for residential purpose?
Okay.
Which domicile do you use?
But then we go back to the definition, okay? And I want to guide you to the following, okay? It's
Okay.
where you are deemed to be constantly present, okay? So
Yes.
that can be a factual inquiry as well. So the law is the place where you are deemed to be constantly present. So I am going to make an example to you now. Okay?
Okay.
You are saying to me you are in Gauteng 6 months of the year, and then you leave Gauteng and then you come to Cape Town 6 months of the year. Okay, that
Yes.
is an example related to our parliamentarians and stuff like that. Okay, so
Okay.
if we now do a factual inquiry on the following, okay, the following tells us domicile is the place where the person is deemed to be constantly present. So what does this person do? This person goes to the bank, okay, and makes application for a bond to buy a house, okay. The person
Okay.
goes to the bank to apply for finance to buy a car. The person goes to Woolworths and opens a Woolworths account. Okay? What does the
Yeah.
person do? In all of the application forms, the person puts down the Cape Town address. Okay?
Okay.
Listing is domicile. Okay?
Yes.
So, for purposes, now you see, for purposes of exercising his or her rights and fulfilling his obligations, when he fills out that application form saying, I live in Gauteng, this is my address in Gauteng, so when I have to fulfill my obligations, it will be from Gauteng. In that contract, he also says, if I default on my loan or if I default on my car payment, where can you
Okay.
send summons to? You can send summons to my address in Gauteng. So in law, that person chooses his domicile to be Gauteng, even if in his or her factual absence. So a factual inquiry can be done to establish what your domicile is. Does it make sense?
It makes sense, advocate. If
Okay.
we look at, if we have to understand it the way you have explained it, it makes sense. But there are situations where you walk in a bank. I mean, you walk into a bank. It all depends. If you're in Gauteng, you're using the bank. You're using other facilities that require you to give a proof of address, and
Yes.
you will use the address that is convenient, I guess. If I'm going to the embassy now and the embassy is in Pretoria, they require an address that shows that I live in Pretoria. And if I'm in Cape Town, they require an address that proves that I live in Cape Town in order to take my application.
No, that is wrong. That is wrong because then you
Okay.
are committing fraud. Okay?
Okay.
Your
Okay.
domicile, you must, and this is, we're going to look at legislation, and this is the Domicile Act. Okay? And one of the requirements, okay,
Yes. Okay.
if you look at the general principles, okay, the general principle says you must. Okay, it doesn't give you a choice, it doesn't give you discretion. You must, it's peremptory. The law says that every person must have a domicile at all times. So you can't choose your domicile based on convenience. Okay, the law is not going to allow that. Okay.
Okay, so
But
what makes now the factual, let me say factual absence, like in the definition in Hilton, in page 51, which says that
so
even in the event of his or her factual absence.
So we're going back to your example where you're saying to me, I am in Gauteng for 6 months and I'm in the Western Cape for 6 months.
Yeah.
So although I'm factually absent from the Western Cape for 6 months of the year, my chosen domicilium is still the Western Cape, because in the next 6 months I'm returning back to the Western Cape.
Okay.
Right?
Okay. That just says, advocate, at the end of the day, advocate, you need to choose one address as your domicile address.
Yes.
Even
Yes.
if you have equal period of residence in two different addresses, or for in case if I have 4 months in Cape Town, in the Western Cape, and 8 months in Gauteng, I need to decide if Western Cape, even though I live here for 4 months, is my domicile address.
That's correct. Because
Okay.
that is
All
the
right.
place. That is the place where you will do what?
We receive
You
any.
will exercise your rights. You will fulfill your obligations, even in the event of your factual absence.
Oh, that's clear.
Okay?
Thank
So
you,
if
advocate. That
summons
makes
is
sense.
sent to you, if someone issues summons against you, okay, the summons will be sent to the Western Cape, because that is your domicile.
Factual address.
So
Domicile
you
address.
cannot make an excuse in the law. You cannot make an excuse in the law. No, I didn't receive the summons because I was in Gauteng. Okay.
Okay. So it will be deemed all time that even if I'm in Gauteng or I'm in another province, my primary domicile address is where they assume that any summons that is issued to me will be sent to, regardless of if I. Okay.
Exactly. Because that's the one you've chosen.
Okay. That's clear,
Okay.
advocate.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you, advocate.
You can put your mic on silent.
Okay.
Okay, students. I had a discussion with one student now. I hope it made sense to the others as well. Okay, so let's, after going to the general principles of domicile, I want us quickly to go to the kinds of domicile. But before that, I want us to go to the section above paragraph 7.5, the heading feedback, because it tells us now that in South African law, the law of domicile is regulated by the Domicile Act. Okay, and the Domicile Act tells us that a person does not lose his or her previous domicile until he or she has acquired a new domicile, whether it's by domicile of choice or by operation of law. Okay, so you cannot relinquish your domicile until you have acquired a new domicile. Okay, so there can never be a situation where your domicile is in doubt, or whether it's in abeyance or something like that. Okay, so now I want us to go to the kinds of domicile. Okay, and the first domicile is the domicile of origin. Okay, if we look at paragraph 7.5, the first domicile we are going to look at is the domicile of origin. Students, give me 1 second. Let's continue. So those of you who have Heaton, we at page 41 and page 42 of Heaton at the moment. Okay, page 41 and page 42 of Heaton. Okay, page 41 and page 42 of Heaton. And in terms of domicile of origin, okay, it tells you how the person acquires a domicile of origin and how this domicile can become a domicile of choice. So, an example, the place you are born at, okay? So, if you were born in Tygerberg Hospital, your mother takes you home from the hospital to Belleville, okay? From the hospital, your domicile of origin now becomes Belleville until you turn 18 years old and you move out to your own flat and you choose your own domicile, okay? So basically, our default domicile is our domicile of origin. Okay, so also on page 42, the domicile of choice, and this is where a person chooses his or her domicile. Okay, so it tells us the person must be competent to acquire a domicile of choice. Okay, and it is very one of the factors you need to look at is you first need to establish the person's competency to acquire a domicile of choice. And one of the factors we look at here is the capacity to act. Okay, now if we look at section 1.1 of the Domicile Act, okay, section 1.1 of the Domicile Act, and the full citation is the Domicile Act 3 of 1992. And it tells us anyone of 18 years of age or older, or anyone under the age of 18 years who may by law has the status of a major is competent to acquire a domicile of choice. Okay, this is so, very, very importantly, this is so regardless of a person's sex or marital status. Okay, then if we look at the second requirement as set out in the Act, this is that the person must have, okay, the word must is used again, the person must have the mental capacity to make a rational choice. Okay, consequently, a mentally ill person, okay? Firstly, a mentally ill person or a person with a serious intellectual disability cannot acquire a domicile of choice. Give me a second. Sorry, students, for that. I just had to do something quickly. So I said requirement number one is you must be 18 years or older, and this is regardless of your sex or your marital status. Okay, and then we're looking here at domicile of choice now. So requirement number two, that a person that the person must have the mental capacity to make a rational choice. This means that consequently, a mentally ill person or a person with a serious intellectual disability cannot acquire a domicile of choice. Okay? So let's look at another requirement. We look at presence and intention as requirements for acquiring a domicile of choice. Okay? So, firstly, you must have the lawful presence and intention to settle for an indefinite period of time. Okay? So, lawful presence is determined objectively, whereas intention to settle with an indefinite period is determined subjectively. Okay? Any questions so far? Any questions for me so far? Any questions, students? Let me just check the chat function. Okay, no questions. So, so
Sorry, sir.
who am I speaking to?
Monwabisi from Cape Town.
Hi, Munwa. What is your question?
I see the with. I just need clarity. Maybe I'm moving ahead. I just want to double check with regards to the domicile of dependence. I'm a bit confused there. And how does it relate to the domicile of choice? If we can just explain those two, how do they differ?
The domicile of a dependent.
Of dependence.
Okay. Now, if you make a reference to a dependent, you either making a reference to a minor child, okay, or someone who's over the age of 18 and cannot choose his or her own domicile, meaning you're referring to a mentally ill person or a person with serious intellectual disability. Okay, so meaning that person will have a domicile, which we're going to speak to now, which is determined by the operation of law, or we refer to it as the domicile of closest connection. So I'm going to go over to that now, then it will make a bit more sense. Okay. Does that make sense to you, Munwabezi? Okay.
Because I'm looking at here when they're saying a common law, at common law, a wife. How does then a wife become a domicile of dependence? And yet we are saying the requirement.
Remember, the common law is not in operation anymore because domicile in South African law is regulated by legislation. Okay, it's regulated in terms of the Domicile Act. Okay, so the common law provisions are not relevant anymore. Okay, because at common law, okay, at common law, when a wife was married to her husband, she followed the domicile of her husband, meaning she was treated like a dependent. Okay, but the common law position does not apply anymore, because if you look at section 1.1 of the Domicile Act, it tells you that a person over the age of 18, okay, regardless of the person's sex and marital status. So the common law position has fallen away. Do you have that, Munwabezi?
I thank you. Thanks a lot. I understand now. Maybe
Okay.
inclusion of common law that I confused it
Yeah.
with.
Okay. So let's go over to the next one, which is domicile by operation of law. Okay, Louise, I will come to your question now. You're asking me, please explain the subjective and objective difference. I will come to that. Any other questions? Okay. So if there's no other questions, then we go over to the assigned domicile, meaning domicile by operation of law, and domicile of closest connection. And here we look at firstly the domicile of a minor child, and also we're looking at the domicile of a mentally incapacitated person. Now, simply put, okay, the law assigns, okay, let me go to the introduction first, and it tells us that anyone, okay, anyone who does not have the capacity to acquire a domicile of choice has a domicile by operation of law. Meaning, if you are not in the position to acquire your own domicile, meaning you are under the age of 18 years old, okay, you're regarded as a minor child, and it tells us you acquire a domicile by operation of law. This applies to children under the age of 18, and mentally incapacitated persons. Okay, the reason for this is they cannot acquire a domicile of choice. Okay, they are granted a domicile by operation of law for as long as that impediment exists. Okay, so for long as that impediment exists, one of the examples is the impediment of minority. Okay, minority is an impediment. Why? Because it limits your capacity. Okay, so for as long as the minority or mental incapacity continues. So if we look at the domicile of a minor child, it tells us the law assigns a domicile to a minor child for as long as his or her minority lasts. Okay? For as long as his or her minority lasts. Okay? And if you go to section 2.1 of the Domicile Act, okay, if we now look at the next class of person, who is the mentally incapacitated person. I'm going to move it this way. If we look at the mentally incapacitated person, okay, the law tells us that a person who is incapable of acquiring a domicile of choice, okay, sorry, I'm referring to the minor again, is domiciled at the place which he or she is most closely connected to, and for practical purposes, that is the house of the parent or the guardian. Okay, section 2.1 of the Domicile Act. Okay? So, section 2.2 of the Domicile Act contains a rebuttable presumption. Okay? It's a rebuttable presumption that if a minor's home is one or both, where one of both of his parents is, okay, it is presumed that the parental home is the minor's domicile. Okay, the term parents or the definition parents also includes the adoptive parents of the child and also the parents of a child who are not married to each other. Okay? Now we're going to look at the second class of persons, who is the domicile of a mentally incapacitated person. Okay, so a mentally incapacitated person's domicile is also determined by the operation of law. Okay, and in order to establish the domicile of this kind of person, you determine the domicile to which the person is most closely connected to. Okay, you determine the domicile of where the person is most closely connected to. And for example, this can now be a mental facility as well. Okay, this can be a mental facility as well. Okay. Students, any questions for me? Any questions for me? Okay. Um, if there's no questions, I don't think I'm going to continue any further here today. I will continue our discussion on. I see someone has a question. I'll come to you now. Let me just finish this. Um, I will continue our discussion on the minor and juristic acts on on next Saturday. Okay. Um, please don't forget, Angela. I'm noting your question. I'm going to look at that now. Is there anyone else who has a comment before I go to Angela's question? Anyone else who has a comment before I go to Angela's question? Anyone else who has a comment before I go to Angela's question?
Maybe let me chip in, sir, just by asking, can
Who am
I,
I speaking to?
sorry, Monwabisi,
Oh, Monwa busy, yes?
I'm so sorry, I needed to have lifted my hand first.
No, it's fine. What is your comment or question?
For me, it's just, for instance, when you talk about the minor, so when trying to say, for instance, someone cannot, because they're minor, they may not get the domicile.
They
Am I
can't
correct?
choose their own
They
domicile.
can't choose. Yes, they can't choose
Yes.
the domicile. And then what about the Children's Act and so on? At what point do we use these acts? Because I'm still confused. I'm new in the law space. It's my first.
Okay.
So because you find there's an act that says you may be infringing upon whatever you do according to a certain section in terms of the children's right. You may look at the interest of the child. So at what point do I determine now which is the right remedy for this? I don't know. I always get confused. There's too many acts. Maybe you can guide there.
You
Because now,
must be guided. You must be
yes.
guided by the law. And if you look at the Children's Act, which says, okay, and here I'm going to show you an example of how the law interlinks with each other, okay? Because I told you in the example when I started our discussion that for the purposes of a child, we follow the jurisdiction of a child, okay? But if we go to the Domicile Act now, okay, the Domicile Act says it's the place where that child is most closely connected to. And that place is in all likelihood the parental home. Okay? So it makes sense that a child would live with his or her parents. Okay? That is why we follow the jurisdiction of the child. Does it make sense?
Thank you. Now it makes sense. I always struggle to link all the
I
time.
can't hear you.
Sorry, I'm saying I always struggle to link. So thank you for that.
Okay. Students, okay, let me go back to the question of Angela. Okay, and Angela says, what is the difference between a subjective test and an objective test? Okay, an objective test is we're looking at, let me just go back to the notes. Acquire. Okay, so it tells us that if we look at factors such as lawful presence and intention to settle for an indefinite period of time. Okay, so the lawful presence is determined objectively. Okay, so if we look at an objective test with regard to lawful presence, okay, if we look at it objectively, Angela, this is the example I made earlier where you, when you go to the bank, when you sign contracts, when you do the loan for the house, when you do the application for credit, when you fill out the UNISA application form and the address you give, that is where you indicate where you will lawfully be. Okay,
Hi, Advocate.
so
Sorry to disturb.
yeah,
It's Angela here.
yes, Angela.
My question is actually related to homeless people and what the law says regarding their domicile.
Okay, so I'm looking at Louise's answer first.
Okay,
Okay, so let me look at Louise's answer first. So Louise, in terms of the lawful requirement, this is how to objectively determine if the person is lawfully at the place, because that is the place where you can now send summonses and all other relevant legal processes to. Okay, so it's done objectively. Okay, how many contracts, which addresses was given, whatever. Now, if we look at the requirement of the intention to settle for an indefinite period of time, that is a subjective test. Okay, so subjectively, you chose your address in Belleville, your address is number 15 Voortrekker Road, your flat is painted green inside, you at the flat 5 days a week because the 2 weekends of the month you go visit your mom and them in Stellenbosch. On a Sunday night you come back and you come get ready for work, but you come to your flat, you park your car in the bottom in parking bay 7. Those are all subjective factors, factors related to you specifically. Okay, so Louise, I hope that makes sense to you. And then I want to go to Angela's question, where Angela posed the question about homeless people. So, Angela, I want us, for your purposes, I want us to go back to page 55, quickly, the top, and look at the 3 principles of domicile and apply that to a homeless person. Okay? We're going to look at the 3 principles of domicile and apply that to a homeless person quickly. Okay, give me 1 second. Angela? So if we look at the first principle, every person must have a domicile at all times. So what we follow in the law related to a homeless person is, okay, the domicile that person had before he became homeless. Okay? The domicile that person had before he became homeless. Okay? So that's the best way in which I can answer your question. Any other concerns related to that, Angela?
Just the last one. Okay, you're saying the last address that the person had, right, is regarded as
Yes.
their domicile. So if that place doesn't exist anymore,
If that place does not exist anymore, okay, the onus is now on the homeless person, because now we go to principle number 3, okay? And if
okay,
we go to principle number 3, it says no one can have, sorry, principle number 2. Principle number 2, because now that presumption comes in, okay, where a person has to prove, okay, and that is also a factual inquiry. A person has to prove that his or her domicile has changed. So that homeless person has to prove that, okay, that place is not in existence anymore.
hmm.
Okay, in law, in terms of process, it can become a bit tricky, it can become a bit difficult, but the law attempts its best to provide certainty.
Yeah, because
Okay,
now I'm thinking if I had to say sue somebody who is homeless, obviously I need to provide an address whereby summons or a letter should be delivered to. So if the person is homeless, what happens then?
okay, so let me answer that question in terms of the way I answered the previous question.
Uh-huh.
We do an objective test for lawfulness.
Okay.
Okay, so in terms of that, the process to follow then is to run like a credit check on the person, to see who the person signed contracts with, who the person signed agreements with. And in terms of those agreements, there would be a chosen domicile. Okay,
So
so
mostly
in
used
terms of,
address will be the address that will be used.
yes, because that is what the person lawfully chose as a domicile.
Okay. Thank you
Okay,
so much, Advocate.
okay. Um, someone's mic is on. Someone's mic is on. Luzuko, please switch off your mic. Okay.
Sorry,
So
Advocate Clara, sorry, sorry to interrupt, Terence here. Just a quick one on the on just an example, right? Talking about prisoners now.
I
They
knew that one was gonna come.
they uh, they live in Cape Town, a married couple live in Cape Town. The husband commits a crime, murder for whatever reason,
Mm,
and he's now sent to a maximum security prison in Pretoria, and he resides there.
mm,
He's constantly present there. However, her domicile, because she's married, is in Cape Town. His is in. Does his change just by the fact that he's constantly in prison now, or does it still
yes.
remain in Cape Town?
It, it, it depends on whether he's been sent. It also depends on the time he's been sent to prison. And you are telling me he's sent to a high security prison for an
Maximum security.
indefinite period. Yes. So the prison can become his domicile. I'm going to give you an example now, because now the wife, okay, who stays maybe in Cape Town might decide to divorce him, okay? And she needs to issue summons against him, okay? Where must the sheriff deliver the summons to? The sheriff must serve the summons to him in prison. So
Right.
the prison
Okay.
can become his domicile by operation of law.
Okay. So I got it.
Okay.
Right. Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, Terence? Anything else? Okay, so if there's no other questions, those of you who are going to have one-on-one sessions with me, when you fill out the query form, make sure you put a student number so I can send you an email to there, or a contact number so one can contact you in terms of that. Okay? Students, if there's nothing else, we will speak to each other on Monday again, and on Monday I'll be sending students feedback. Thank you, students. Have a good morning.
Owen,
Is
Adele, sorry to interrupt you. There are quite a number of students who still haven't put their student numbers in the chat. Can I please just ask that they do that?
Okay, Adele.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Adele. Students, last announcement. Please, before you log off, put your student number into the chat function for us. Please put your student number into the chat function before you log off. And then this is where I conclude. We will speak to each other on Monday again. Okay, students, work hard. Have a good weekend. We will speak soon. Goodbye.
Students, I've also posted the booking form for a one-on-one session with Owen in your chat now. So please use that link as well to get to the form. It's a quick link. Thank you very much.
Thank you.